Your energy is one of the most valuable assets you possess, but most people walk through life handing it out like it costs nothing. They smile at everyone, accommodate anyone, entertain every conversation, and say yes to situations that drain them before they even understand what's happening. When you are too friendly, you forget that every interaction is an exchange, and you are giving away something you can never recover: your emotional power. People feel your energy before they understand your words, and when you project excessive friendliness, when you treat everyone like they deserve a deep place in your world, you unintentionally send a signal that your presence is easily accessible, easily offered, and easily taken for granted. Your friendliness becomes a habit rather than a conscious gift, and anything given unconsciously loses its value. You have to understand that your attention is a form of currency, and the world knows how to spend it even if you don't. Every time you give someone your time, your emotional warmth, your support, you're investing in them. But here's the truth most people never realize: not everyone deserves an investment. Not everyone earns access to your energy. When you walk around being overly friendly, you give people the impression that they have the right to enter your space without permission. You start accepting conversations you don't need, advice you never asked for, and emotional responsibilities that were never yours. You let people drain you slowly because you open yourself up too widely, too quickly. And once they get used to that version of you, they expect it. They feel entitled to it. They begin to assume that you will always be available, always understanding, always welcoming. This is where the danger lies. When friendliness becomes your default setting, you lose the ability to detect who truly deserves your presence and who is merely benefiting from it. People with strong, grounded energy know that not everyone deserves their softness. They know that kindness must be intentional, not automatic. But when your friendliness is automatic, when it is given without filtering, people start interacting with you based on convenience rather than respect. They greet you not because they value you, but because they know you will respond warmly. They come to you not because they care, but because they know you won't say no. You train people to expect access to your emotional space before they've earned it. Your energy becomes diluted when you distribute it everywhere. Instead of being a powerful force that influences your environment, you become a background presence, a familiar convenience, an emotional vending machine for those who want to withdraw comfort without deposit. And because you are too friendly, you start engaging in conversations that lead nowhere, relationships that have no foundation, and interactions that leave you feeling mentally exhausted. You end your days tired, not because you worked hard on your dreams, but because you entertained too many people who had nothing to do with your elevation. You must understand that your energy is not charity. It is not something you give away freely without intention. It is something that shapes your reality, influences your success, and defines the quality of your life. When you stop being too friendly, you begin to command your space. You start valuing silence over forced interactions. You start valuing your time over people's expectations. You begin noticing how much stronger, clearer, and more focused your mind becomes when you stop pouring yourself into everyone who smiles at you. You start seeing how many people were in your life only because you made it easy for them to be there. You realize how many people stayed close not because they valued you, but because your friendliness made their life easier. When you reduce your excessive friendliness, people start noticing something different about you. They sense boundaries. They sense self-respect. They sense that your time and presence mean something. And the moment you start treating your energy as something valuable, people start treating you differently. They approach you with more respect. They speak with more intention. They stop asking for what they used to take freely. Your absence becomes more powerful than your forced presence ever was. You stop spreading yourself thin and start investing in yourself, your growth, your inner peace. Instead of being liked by everyone, you become valued by the right ones. And that shift alone transforms your entire life, your relationships, your mindset, and the direction of your future. When you become too friendly with people, you unknowingly create boundaries that you never approved, and these boundaries begin shaping the way others interact with you. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. You greet people warmly, you allow them into your space, you smile when you don't feel like smiling, you listen when you don't have the capacity to listen, and over time, people start believing that this version of you is the default version. They assume that your openness is an invitation, your friendliness is a promise, and your attention is a commitment. You never said they could speak to you a certain way. You never agreed to let them make decisions about your life. And you never gave them the authority to involve themselves in your emotional or personal matters. Yet, your over-friendliness makes them feel like they have a right to do exactly that. You don't see the damage at first because most of it is happening at a subtle level. beneath the surface of your everyday interactions. People begin to shape their behavior around the access you've unintentionally offered. They start giving opinions about your personal decisions because your friendliness made them believe you want their input. They assume you're fine with constant messages, constant calls, or constant interruptions because you've always responded with a welcoming tone. They overstep, not always out of malice, but because they believe you allow it. And the truth is, you did allow it without knowing you were allowing it. Over-friendliness blurs the line between courtesy and permission. People mistake kindness for consent. They begin speaking to you without considering your emotional space, inserting themselves into your life without considering whether they truly belong there. Suddenly, someone who was meant to be an acquaintance feels comfortable criticizing your choices, offering unsolicited advice, or expecting emotional labor that drains you deeply. These invisible boundaries that over-friendliness creates are dangerous because they make you responsible for expectations you never set. You find yourself overwhelmed by the weight of other people's assumptions. You wonder why certain people feel entitled to you, why they feel comfortable asking for favors, why they think your life is open for discussion. It's because your friendliness built a door and left it open. You never meant for strangers or casual connections to step that far in, but your warm demeanor made them believe they had earned something they never actually earned. People rarely question the access they're given, they simply use it. And unless you consciously close that door, they will continue walking through it. You also begin to shrink your true self just to maintain the persona of the friendly one. You start tolerating conversations that make you uncomfortable, agreeing to things you don't want to do, listening to people's problems. Even when you're emotionally drained, you do all of this because somewhere deep inside you feel obligated to maintain the friendliness you once displayed. You fear that if you pull back, people will label you rude, cold, distant, or selfish. But what you don't realize is that their reactions are another form of proof that the boundaries were never healthy to begin with. If your withdrawal from unnecessary access causes someone to lash out, it means they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. They weren't valuing you, they were using your availability. When you are too friendly, you give people the wrong map of who you are. They start navigating your life thinking they understand your limits when they don't. They assume your patience is unlimited, your kindness is unconditional, and your openness is everlasting. They build expectations based on the version of you that caters to their convenience. And when you finally decide to reclaim your space, you are met with resistance because the boundaries you put in place contradict the boundaries your friendliness had previously suggested. This is why so many people struggle to step back. They fear the backlash, the confusion, the disappointment of others. But what they must understand is that the real problem was never the boundary, it was the lack of one. You must learn to communicate your limits through your behavior, not your words. You don't need to announce your boundaries, you simply need to live them. Reduce unnecessary interactions, become selective with your responses, and allow silence to speak on your behalf. When people see that your energy is intentional, not available on demand, they begin adjusting their own behavior. You'll notice people becoming more respectful, more mindful, and more cautious with how they approach you. They begin understanding that access to you is a privilege, not an expectation. And once you reshape the boundaries that over-friendliness distorted, you regain control of your relationships, your emotional balance, and your personal space. When you are excessively friendly, you begin to attract takers, people who are not interested in your growth, your success, or your well-being, but only in what they can extract from you. These individuals sense openness, kindness, and accessibility like a beacon, and they move toward it with intent. Over-friendliness becomes an invisible sign that says, I am easy to reach, easy to influence, and easy to take advantage of. The problem is not that these people are inherently malicious. It's that they are opportunistic, and they naturally gravitate toward what is freely available. The more open and accommodating you are, the more likely you are to pull in people who will take relentlessly without giving anything of value in return. They are like emotional parasites, feeding on your attention, your time, and your energy, slowly leaving you drained and scattered without ever contributing positively to your life. Over-friendliness is often mistaken for generosity, but there is a critical difference. True generosity is intentional and measured. It is giving with discernment, giving to those who appreciate it, and giving when it aligns with your own values and goals. Over-friendliness, on the other hand, is indiscriminate. It does not weigh the consequences or the return on investment. It does not consider the character or intention of the person receiving your kindness. Instead, it operates on impulse or habit, creating a pattern where people learn that your availability is guaranteed, your patience is limitless, and your support comes without expectation. This pattern becomes dangerous because it invites takers who thrive on exploiting these qualities. They are not looking to grow with you. They are looking to benefit at your expense, often without you realizing it until you feel emotionally or mentally depleted. The problem with attracting takers is that they subtly reshape your life without your consent. They demand attention when you have none to give. They ask for favors when it costs you dearly, and they manipulate your kindness to suit their own needs. They can mask their intentions behind charm, flattery, or emotional appeals, and over-friendliness makes it easy for them to find a foothold in your life. Over time, your energy is siphoned away in small increments until you are left questioning why you feel exhausted or why your goals seem perpetually out of reach. The more takers you attract, the more your focus, clarity, and drive are diluted. You may find yourself spending hours solving problems that are not yours to solve, attending to emotions that are not your responsibility, or navigating conflicts that arise from people who feel entitled to your support simply because you have been too available. Being too friendly also blurs the lines between genuine relationships and transactional ones. You may feel surrounded by friends, but some of them are not friends at all. They are individuals who have learned that your generosity has no limits. They will approach you when convenient, disappear when you need reciprocity, and reappear when their needs are pressing. This creates a cycle of imbalance, where your emotional and mental energy is constantly being drained by people who take without giving back. And because over-friendliness often stems from a desire to be liked, accepted, or validated, it traps you in a paradox where the very behavior intended to create connection ends up attracting the wrong types of connection, leaving you feeling alone, misunderstood, or exploited. The key to breaking this cycle is awareness and selectivity. You must begin to recognize the difference between those who contribute positively to your life and those who drain it. Being friendly does not mean being foolish or indiscriminate. It does not mean opening the doors of your life to everyone who smiles at you or asks for your time. You must learn to give selectively, to invest your energy in people who respect it, and to recognize when someone is taking without offering anything of value in return. This is not about being cold or unkind. It is about understanding that your energy is finite and that how you distribute it determines the quality of your life, the depth of your relationships, and the speed of your personal and professional growth. When you start practicing this discernment, you will notice an immediate shift in the type of people around you. The takers will naturally drift away when they sense that your energy is no longer available on demand. At the same time, those who truly value you, your time, and your presence will gravitate toward you, seeking meaningful and mutually beneficial connections. This shift transforms your environment, your relationships, and your inner world. You begin to surround yourself with individuals who elevate rather than deplete, who challenge rather than exploit, and who inspire rather than drain. Over-friendliness may have attracted takers initially, but conscious selectivity allows you to attract supporters, collaborators, and allies who align with your values and contribute positively to your journey. It is through this intentional cultivation of relationships that you reclaim your energy, your focus, and your power. If you want to rise in life, if you want to grow into the person you are meant to become, you cannot be available to everybody. Growth requires separation, and separation requires boundaries. When you are too friendly, you blur the line between who is allowed into your world and who is not, and this creates a constant pull that keeps you tethered to distractions, obligations, and the expectations of others. Being overly available, overly warm, and overly accommodating may feel like a positive trait, but in reality, it prevents you from reaching the level of focus, discipline, and clarity necessary to achieve true greatness. People who are committed to rising understand that their energy, time, and presence are too valuable to be spread thin across everyone who crosses their path. They understand that proximity to the wrong people slows down momentum, dilutes purpose, and consumes the very resources they need to excel. Distance is not rejection. Distance is protection. It is the safeguard between your aspirations and the interference of others. When you make yourself available to everyone, you open doors to distractions, drama, and the emotional baggage of people who have nothing to contribute to your vision. Friends, acquaintances, colleagues, or even strangers can easily insert themselves into your life and demand attention that should belong to your growth, your work, and your goals. The problem with over-friendliness is that it often comes with the assumption that your presence is a service to others rather than a resource to be managed wisely. When everyone can count on your time, energy, and kindness, people forget that these are not inexhaustible. They forget that the person they are interacting with is also a human being with limits, ambitions, and priorities. And over time, the constant influx of demands can weigh you down, scatter your focus, and keep you from creating the life you are capable of building. Those who achieve greatness understand that selective access is key. They know that not everyone deserves a front row seat to their life. Not everyone deserves a say in their decisions. And not everyone deserves emotional investment. This selectivity is not arrogance or selfishness. It is strategy. It is an understanding that your environment shapes your mind and your mind shapes your reality. The people you allow close to you, the interactions you choose to engage in, and the attention you give are all shaping forces. If you are surrounded by people who pull you in multiple directions, who demand your emotional energy unnecessarily, or who distract you with trivial matters, your ability to focus on your purpose diminishes. Over-friendliness removes the natural filter that protects your space and allows you to operate at maximum potential. Distance also creates respect, and respect strengthens your position. When people cannot reach you at all times, when your presence is not automatically available for their convenience, they begin to recognize the value of your time, attention, and energy. They start approaching you with intention rather than assumption. They no longer feel entitled to your immediate response or constant approval. This shift in how people perceive you changes the quality of your relationships, the weight of your interactions, and the energy that surrounds you. You go from being someone who is taken for granted to someone who is regarded as intentional, purposeful, and disciplined. And it is through this discipline in your interactions that you create the mental clarity necessary to think bigger, act smarter, and move faster toward your goals. Over-friendliness also erodes your internal boundaries without you realizing it. You start saying yes to conversations, commitments, and obligations that do not serve your growth. You start prioritizing the comfort or expectations of others over your own progress. You compromise on time that could be spent in focused work, self-reflection, or skill development. You are constantly reacting to others rather than proactively designing your life. Distance, on the other hand, gives you the mental space to operate intentionally. It allows you to decide who deserves your energy, how your time is allocated, and what interactions truly matter. It creates the mental and emotional environment for strategic thinking, focused action, and accelerated progress. Those who do not understand the importance of distance often find themselves exhausted, scattered, and frustrated, wondering why their efforts do not yield the results they desire. Greatness requires you to rise above immediate social gratification. It requires you to prioritize long-term vision over short-term approval. Over-friendliness satisfies the immediate need to be liked, to be accepted, or to be agreeable, but it comes at the cost of progress, focus, and achievement. By choosing distance, by managing access to yourself, and by prioritizing relationships that align with your purpose, you protect your growth, sharpen your focus, and position yourself to reach levels of success that those who spread themselves thin can never attain. Distance is not isolation, it is cultivation. It is the space in which your mind can think clearly, your energy can recharge, and your goals can grow without unnecessary interference. It is the very principle that separates those who dream from those who achieve, those who float through life from those who command it, and those who live reactively from those who create proactively. Protecting your focus and emotional balance is one of the most critical yet overlooked aspects of personal development, and being too friendly often undermines both. When you extend yourself to everyone, when you respond to every call, attend every social obligation, and offer emotional labor to people who have not earned it, you slowly erode your capacity to concentrate on what truly matters. Your mind becomes cluttered with external voices, opinions, and expectations that have nothing to do with your own goals. You start to lose track of where your energy begins and where other people's demands end. Over-friendliness creates invisible obligations that chip away at your focus without you even realizing it. You become like a sponge for other people's needs, problems, and insecurities, and in the process, you neglect the one person who should always be your priority, yourself. Emotional discipline is not about shutting people out. It is about choosing where and how you invest your energy so that it multiplies rather than diminishes your life. Being too friendly often disguises itself as a virtue, a trait that others admire and appreciate. People praise your warmth, your availability, and your kindness, but what they fail to see is the cost you pay. Every moment you spend attending to someone else's emotional or practical demands is a moment you cannot spend developing yourself, working toward your goals, or nurturing your own well-being. Your focus is divided, your mental clarity is clouded, and your emotional state becomes reactive rather than proactive. Over time, you may notice that you are perpetually tired, overwhelmed, and distracted, unable to complete tasks or make decisions efficiently. You may even start to feel resentment toward those who constantly pull on your energy, but the root of the problem is not them. It is the lack of boundaries you allow by being excessively friendly. Emotional balance is equally compromised when you overextend yourself. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, every time you make yourself available when it is inconvenient, every time you absorb someone else's negativity without filter, you are destabilizing your inner equilibrium. Over-friendliness teaches people to expect emotional availability at all times, which is not sustainable. They begin to lean on you for validation, reassurance, or support in ways that deplete your energy. You become reactive to their moods, opinions, and demands, losing touch with your own emotional needs. The stress, subtle frustration, and mental fatigue accumulate, often manifesting as irritability, anxiety, or lack of motivation. You may not even realize it, but your over-friendliness is silently eroding the calm and balance that allow you to perform at your best. Protecting your focus and emotional balance requires intention. It requires understanding that your time, energy, and mental capacity are limited resources that must be managed carefully. Being selective in your friendliness is not arrogance, it is strategy. It is a conscious decision to direct your energy toward people and activities that elevate you rather than deplete you. It is about recognizing that not every relationship, interaction, or conversation deserves the same level of investment. By limiting access to yourself, you reduce distractions, clarify your priorities, and create an environment that supports your personal growth. When you no longer expend energy on everyone indiscriminately, you free your mind to concentrate on what truly matters: your ambitions, your creativity, your relationships that are meaningful, and your own emotional and mental well-being. Another aspect of protecting focus and emotional balance is learning to say no without guilt. Over-friendliness often comes with a compulsion to please, to avoid conflict, or to be liked. But every time you compromise your boundaries to accommodate others, you sacrifice a piece of your focus and peace. Saying no is not rejection of others, it is affirmation of yourself. It is the declaration that your energy has limits, that your priorities are sacred, and that your well-being is non-negotiable. When you embrace this principle, you not only protect your focus, but also teach others to respect it. They begin to understand that your time and energy are intentional, not automatically available, and their approach to you becomes more thoughtful, more measured, and more aligned with mutual respect. Ultimately, being too friendly without discernment undermines the very foundation of productivity, personal growth, and emotional stability. When you reclaim control over your energy, when you limit your availability, and when you prioritize interactions that add value to your life, you create a mental and emotional environment where focus and balance are preserved. Your mind becomes sharper, your decisions become clearer, and your capacity to achieve goals increases exponentially. Emotional discipline becomes second nature, and your relationships become more intentional rather than chaotic. You no longer feel drained by the demands of others because you have learned that protecting your energy is not only necessary for success, it is a reflection of self-respect, self-awareness, and strategic living. Respect is not automatically given. It is earned, cultivated, and reinforced through the way you manage your presence, your time, and your energy. One of the most profound ways to command respect is to stop making yourself too accessible, to stop being excessively friendly in a way that blurs boundaries and invites entitlement. When you are constantly available to everyone, when your attention, your kindness, and your energy are given without discretion, people begin to take you for granted. They assume that your support, your guidance, and your emotional availability are permanent fixtures rather than privileges that must be respected. Over-friendliness can inadvertently signal that your presence is free for the taking, which reduces the perceived value of who you are and what you bring into any interaction. True respect comes when people realize that access to your time, attention, and energy is limited, intentional, and earned. When you reduce over-friendliness, you teach people a vital lesson about boundaries and self-worth. You demonstrate through your behavior that your energy is not a commodity to be spent carelessly, and that not everyone is entitled to occupy your time or emotional space. This does not mean becoming cold or unapproachable. It means creating a clear distinction between generosity and obligation, kindness and availability. People begin to notice the difference immediately. They see that when you are present, it is because you have chosen to be present intentionally and not because you are a passive source of constant accessibility. This intentionality fundamentally shifts the way people perceive you. They begin to approach you with thoughtfulness, with consideration, and with an understanding that your engagement carries weight and significance. Your presence is no longer assumed, it is valued. When people recognize that you are selective in your interactions, they begin to treat you differently. They stop assuming that you will always respond immediately or that you will always say yes. They start to approach conversations with purpose, asking meaningful questions and engaging in dialogue that reflects mutual respect. Your over-friendliness may have once attracted attention and casual approval, but intentional selectivity attracts respect, credibility, and serious consideration. The energy you exude becomes purposeful rather than passive. It is no longer scattered across a multitude of interactions that dilute your influence. Instead, your energy becomes concentrated, commanding, and magnetic, drawing people who value and honor it rather than exploiting it. People begin to internalize that your attention is a resource that has limitations, and those limitations elevate your presence in their eyes. Reducing over-friendliness also shifts the balance of power in relationships. When you are too friendly, others unconsciously hold power over your time, your emotions, and your decisions. They assume entitlement to your patience, your understanding, and your availability. But when you reclaim control and establish boundaries, you reclaim that power. Respect grows naturally because people must now earn the right to engage with you meaningfully. Your choices in whom to interact with and how to interact communicate a strong, unspoken message. You value yourself enough to guard your energy and your focus. People do not challenge this because boundaries inherently demand acknowledgement and consideration. Those who cannot respect your limits reveal themselves, and your life is cleared of relationships that do not contribute positively to your growth. Being intentionally selective also teaches a broader lesson about self-worth and the psychology of relationships. People often mistake friendliness for weakness or over-familiarity for approachability. But when you model restraint, you demonstrate that true strength lies not in constant engagement but in conscious choice. You set a precedent in all of your interactions that your energy, your attention, and your presence are not free commodities but valuable resources that require effort, thought, and respect to access. This shift in perception transforms the dynamics of your personal and professional life. Colleagues, friends, and even casual acquaintances begin to measure their engagement with you against the standards you silently enforce. The respect you command grows organically from the consistency of your boundaries and the clarity of your presence. As you reduce over-friendliness, you also cultivate deeper, more meaningful relationships. People who are genuinely aligned with your values and vision step forward. Those who appreciate your energy and effort naturally gravitate toward you. Your interactions no longer feel shallow or transactional. They feel purposeful, intentional, and fulfilling. You stop wasting energy on people who are indifferent or opportunistic, and instead you invest in relationships that reflect reciprocity, integrity, and mutual growth. This transformation in how you manage accessibility and friendliness not only elevates how others treat you, but also reinforces your own sense of dignity, confidence, and self-respect. Over-friendliness may have once diluted your influence and left you overextended. But through conscious restraint and selective engagement, you command respect, create intentionality, and position yourself as someone whose presence is valued, whose energy is protected, and whose life is designed with purpose and authority.